Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford from Nevada's 4th Congressional District. I'm honored to serve as chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus and to join with all of you and the Vice President today for this kickoff of our Economic Opportunities Tour. I'm delighted to be joined today by 3 phenomenal panelists: Janice Bowdler from the Department of Treasury, Counselor for Racial Equity; Christopher Coles, Department of Transportation, Undersecretary of Transportation for Policy; and Eric Morissette from the Department of Commerce, Undersecretary of Commerce for Minority Business Development Administration. Please welcome our first panel. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're really excited to be here. This is the kickoff to really have a conversation with the American people about the ways that we together can build economic opportunity, prosperity, and wealth that is inclusive, that is about bringing everyone into full economic participation, and to make sure that as we have passed some of the most historic legislation in our country's history, that those investments reach the communities that need it the most. So again, I'm Congressman Stephen Horsford, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. We have been working with the Vice President as well as the Biden-Harris administration to center the people in the policy that we are working to advance. And that is what today is all about. I'm honored to join forces with the Vice President for the kickoff here and to join all of you. And this builds on the work that the members of the Congressional Black Caucus have been advancing throughout this Congress. Today, the Congressional Black Caucus has the largest membership in our history, 60 members. We went from 13 when we were founded, and 1 black woman and Shirley Chisholm, to having 60 members, 31 black women, representing every region of the country. Recently, we introduced a plan to build black wealth that is endorsed and sponsored by 100% of the CBC members. And today, this economic tour will allow us to continue to advance that discussion to close the racial wealth gap, to build economic opportunity, and to address the inequities that we have seen at a time when there are forces who are trying to take away those tools of opportunity. And I want to thank organizations including the Black Economic Alliance, the U.S. Black Chamber, among others, who have worked with us to ground this work. So today, we're going to have a conversation about the resources that are available from the historic legislation that has been passed. And I want to start with Undersecretary Coles. The Vice President is here in Atlanta, in part to highlight the Biden-Harris administration's efforts in making investments in communities that have historically been left out and left behind. So talk to us about how the Department of Transportation is working on those issues, including with the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program.
Congressman Horsford, first, I want to just take this moment to acknowledge you and your leadership as the chair of the CBC. We are here because of your great leadership, so I want to first acknowledge that. As a native of Thomasville, Georgia, I can tell you what it means when you hear a statement of living on the other side of the railroad tracks. And too many communities across the country has seen what infrastructure, when not aligned with community voices, with community aspirations, can do to their communities. And that is no different from a community here in Atlanta, where the I-75-85, known as the Downtown Connector, came into what was known as the Sweet Buttermilk Biscuit District, also Sweet Auburn Avenue, and destroyed 13,000 homes and businesses. Now that legacy, right, still is seen today and experienced today. But through the bipartisan infrastructure law passed by President Biden and Vice President Harris, we have now been able to create what is called the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods Program, which is a $3 billion initiative to actually right the wrongs that came from these investments. And just this week, we were so excited to announce that we were giving $150 million to fund the Stitch project. Now, this is just one step of repairing the harm, but what we also are excited about that we're supporting 3,000 new affordable housing projects, 13,000 construction jobs, and a new apprenticeship to allow Atlantans, those natives, to actually come back, not only start new businesses, but actually have a place to stay. That is an example of how the bipartisan issue law, under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, is trying to right the wrongs of the past.
So Undersecretary Coase, you just mentioned the investments and what they mean around housing, reconnecting communities that have been discriminated against based on past discrimination and policies, and the fact that it's also about job creation and small business opportunities as well. So Undersecretary Morissette, the Vice President just met with business owners that have worked with the Urban League of Greater Atlanta to grow their business. Tell us about the new Capital Readiness Program that you are leading, and what it is and how people in this room can benefit directly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much for leading this panel. I can't help but mention our partner in the Capital Readiness Program, which is the Department of Treasury, which is sitting right, and their team sitting right in front of us. The Capital Readiness Program is a part of the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which is opening up $10 billion to communities around the country. And as you noted, the Urban League is helping to lead that effort here in Metro Atlanta, but we also have the U.S. Black Chamber. I see Ron Busby back there with the U.S. Black Chamber helping to lead that effort. We have 43 partners around the country through the Capital Readiness Program that are helping folks access that $10 billion in state small business credit initiative funding, but they're also helping communities around the country access all sorts of capital throughout this country. The idea that small minority business entrepreneurs have a hard time accessing capital is something that this administration has taken to heart and has done something about. They've done something about that through the Capital Readiness Program, but they did something about that in authorizing the Minority Business Development Agency. We talk about the infrastructure law. MBDA, my agency, has been around for 55 years, but we're 3 years old as an authorized agency. We were founded under the Nixon administration, but this administration, I keep telling folks, we're 55 years old, but 3 years young. Thank you. The MBDA has at its core, and I have the best job, I think, on this panel, to create wealth in communities of color around this country. And that's something different. Creating wealth, the ability for folks to pull themselves up, create a new life for themselves and their families and their communities. We're not giving out anything to anyone. We're helping people who are exceedingly and abundantly able to help themselves, but for an opportunity. The Capital Readiness Program is a part of that opportunity, giving folks the tools that they need to create change for themselves and their communities. So that's why I'm so proud of this administration and this line of work and that partnership with the Department of Treasury.
Now, you kind of stepped on the lead when you said it was just 3 years fully authorized. What was it before? Why is it important for it to be authorized? And what does that provide as far as permanent funding to not just help businesses start, but to actually grow and thrive, which is one of the initiatives from this Economic Opportunities Tour today?
Absolutely. So being a permanently authorized agency is something different. We were around for 55 years, founded under the Nixon administration, but it took a bipartisan coalition of Congress to pass this agency and make it a fully authorized federal agency, thanks to the leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus, a number of other leaders in Congress. But they didn't look the same. They looked like the tapestry of this country, and they realized we were born as an authorized agency in the aftermath of the pandemic. And we know acutely that the pandemic hit communities like ours differently. They hit those communities differently. those socially and economically disadvantaged communities differently. Our agency, as an authorized agency in partnership with Treasury through this Capital Readiness Program, has at our core the ability to reach across the entire federal government and lift up our communities, leveraging not only our capital, but the capital of our partner agencies, leveraging the authorities that this administration has lifted up through their executive orders, but also through the meaningful and intentionality of changing the way we are doing business inside of agencies. I think about this in the context of the Department of Commerce. We as an agency have worked to have over $125 billion of above base funding. We talk about the CHIPS Act. We talked about the Broadband Act that's trying to get this entire country plugged in. And MBDA, a new federal agency's ability to reach inside of those above base program areas and ensure that communities that look like ours, that socially and economically disadvantaged communities, have a part of this investment. That's something real. You ask about what this administration is doing and how it's doing things differently. We're putting our money where our values are, and that's something meaningful.
So we've heard a lot about, the 16 million new small businesses that have been started since the beginning of this Biden-Harris administration, the historic legislation that really is providing investments and to make sure that our communities, every community that has been underserved or disadvantaged historically, are not left out or left behind, and to make sure that we're connecting those businesses, those owners, with the opportunities. And these are just 3 of the federal agencies that oversee the federal procurement process. And so in addition to all of the booths that are here and the information that will be shared both during and following this Economic Opportunities Tour, this is ways that we're reaching directly into the community to make sure we have this conversation. Councilor Bowdler from Treasury, when the Vice President was a senator, she fought for and secured $12 billion for community development financial institutions and minority development depository institutions across our nation. The Biden-Harris administration has been able to administer that funding and give it out directly to local CDFIs and MDIs, some of whom are here today. Can you talk to us about how you work with CDFIs and MDIs to advance specifically racial equity and what that means for the people here in Atlanta?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Congressman Horsford, thank you so much for your championship as well of CDFIs and MDIs. And for those who don't know what that means, we're really talking about mission community-oriented lenders. CDFIs, community development financial institutions, have a mission and a special certification to serve low-income families, low-income neighborhoods, and communities that have long been overlooked and under-resourced when it comes to credit. MDIs are minority depository institutions, Black-owned banks, Latino-owned banks, Asian, Native-owned banks. And we have been super fortunate, Senator, when she was a Senator, Harris, now VP Harris, and the Congressional Black Caucus, among other leaders, have really championed getting resources into institutions that we know are proximate to the communities we're trying to serve. And that is incredibly important that we're investing in those CDFIs and MDIs that are delivering capital in culturally competent ways, that have the relationships with the community, have the presence in the ground. So the signature initiative here, the Emergency Capital Investment Program, was $8.5 billion to 175 CDFIs. Of that, $1.4 billion went to Black-owned and Black majority shareholder institutions, and we estimate that over the course of this program, over the next 10 years, that's going to be $80 billion to Black communities flowing through this program. Okay, but you asked me, what does this mean for Atlanta? Because we throw around these big numbers, so I want to make sure that I'm bringing it home. Georgia CDFIs received $125 million, and 2 of them are Black-owned or Black majority shareholder institutions, and they're here. Hopefully you got to see them. And Cynthia and Robert, I can't see you because the lights are in my face, but Citizens Trust Bank and Carver State Bank are both here. They are recipients and participants in the ESIP program, and their resources are outside. There's also another $35 million in grants to CDFIs that are serving Georgia Avenue, including ACE, which is a local small business lender that some of you in this room might know. And it matters. Let me just give you one example. Because of some of the investments that Carver State Bank received, they were able to provide financing for MedCure, which is a local federally qualified health clinic and healthcare provider here in the greater Atlanta region. Because of the $6 million in financing they received, they're opening up and expanding a new location. That clinic is expected to see 5,000 new patients a year, 90% of which are people of color and 75% of which are low-income families that might not otherwise have gotten access to healthcare or have to travel really far to get quality care. So when we invest in proximate institutions, that means that our businesses, our community assets like healthcare centers and childcare centers are getting the resources that they need. They're also hiring people along the way and creating stable jobs in their communities.
You know, there are a lot of people who question why we need these programs. Why do we need to invest in certain communities that have historically been underserved? And I just want to share that the disparity in wealth is stark, with a significant gap between Black and white per capita wealth. In fact, today, the typical white per capita wealth of white Americans is $284,310, compared to a mere $44,100 for Black Americans. So the agenda around economic prosperity and wealth, this Economic Opportunities Tour and the resources that you all are administering to get to the communities are intended to help close and narrow this racial wealth gap that has persisted. And under the Biden-Harris administration, this has been a center of their agenda across the whole of government. So what resources are available from the federal government to help someone turn their awesome ideas, which we've got a lot of people here with great ideas, great passion, great products. They want to become the creators of wealth, not just the consumers of it. What would you recommend that they do from the standpoint of your programs that you administer within your agency to connect their ideas to the programs that are available through the federal government?
I'll go first. Well, thank you so much for the question. And I'd ask you to, for some of you in this room, go outside. I have tables of the 5 equities that we have at the Minority Business Development Agency. We have a business center here that's outstanding through Georgia Tech. They are doing innovative and novel things, but more importantly, they're trying to connect with you. They're trying to connect with all those who have an interesting idea that they want to get off the ground at any phase of development. We also have the relationship that I mentioned before with the Urban League and the U.S. Black Chamber. We also have a relationship with the MSIs, minority serving institutions around the Metro Atlanta area. The truth is we have equities around the country, 131 equities around this country. Please, mbda.gov. If you have an idea that you're trying to launch, or if you're trying to create a business, formalize your business, connect with our business centers. But if you're a member of other groups that are affiliated with MBDA, if you're a member of a Greek organization, we just signed an MOU with the Divine Nine. I'd ask for you to connect with them. We have we have new and developing MOUs across both federal government and the private sector and affinity groups. If you think that we can be of any value to you, or if you have an idea that just needs to get incubated and developed, come to us, come to me, reach out, and we're happy to work with you and help that idea blossom.
Yeah, I want to put a fine point on why this is so important and how much we're working together right now. Christopher here is in charge of one of the largest public investments that we're going to see in our generation, the bipartisan infrastructure law. In Eric's agency, they're leading the CHIPS and Science Act. And in my agency, we have the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, practically, that's happening all over federal agencies. But what you have up here on stage represents a once-in-a-generation suite of investments that are not only going to transform our economy, but let's be real about what we're talking about. We are in the middle of building the next middle class. These investments that we're talking about are not only onshoring our manufacturing supply and improving our national security, improving our infrastructure, improving our climate resiliency. They are creating job opportunities and contracting opportunities that have the ability to take our communities that have not just been under-resourced, but frankly underestimated, and create a set of opportunities. And now we didn't just say like, okay, go build some manufacturing plants and go build some bridges. We also put the financing out there for businesses to be able to get those contracts and the technical assistance and resources. The Capital Readiness Program is strategic to help businesses really seize these opportunities. Similarly, through your state, here, the state of Georgia, there are more technical assistance opportunities with many of the partners that have already been named with the financial institutions that I talked about. What I want to make clear is that whether you are trying to take your side hustle and turn it into your full-time job, or you're looking for an equity investment to scale your tech company, we are putting the financing and resources out there, and we're doing it through proximate partners that understand Black and brown communities, that understand how to invest in our companies and help scale those enterprises. It's because we're going to be able to get these contracts that I think we're in the best position we've ever been to completely transform Black and brown wealth in this country. And let me say, that is good for everybody, because on behalf of the Treasury Department, I can tell you, it's the right thing to do, but it is also the economically smart thing to do. Right now, we are leaving money on the table when we leave our communities on the economic sidelines. When we get our communities off the economic sidelines, we're generating more wealth, more jobs, and more revenue that is good for everyone. An investment in our Black and brown communities is an investment in America.
Christopher?
I would say we can stop there. There's an amen and all of that. The thing I would just add, as Janice mentioned, we at the Department of Transportation do not take it lightly that we have half of the $1.2 trillion of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the fact that we have to look at, in a sense, this is not just about building roads and bridges. This is literally rebuilding America, and for all of Americans, and particularly those that have been left behind and disinvested, and that is the Black and brown communities, as well as rural communities. As someone who comes from a rural South, I can tell you right now, our main focus is to eliminate and reduce barriers to access to capital. So right now, as mentioned by my colleagues, we have a booth manned by our Office of Small and Disadvantaged Utilization, where they have now launched this past week a new access to capital portal, which will allow entrepreneurs, small businesses to directly connect, interview, solicit, and secure private equity to scale your businesses. That is at the table right now. So that's going to open up billions of dollars. I can tell you, in addition to helping eliminate, it's also allowing the Department of Transportation to put our money where our mouth is. So when we came in on day one, we had a procurement of DBEs and minority contracting, women contracting, set at roughly about 17 to 18%. Our secretary said that's not good enough. In 1 year, we said we're going to go from 18 to 20%. We exceeded that. That goes to Janet's point, is that there is amazing businesses who are ready to take on the work. The other piece here, one of the things I'm really excited about, especially being here in Atlanta, in addition to announcing the dollars that we did to the Stitch, having a working partnership with the Atlanta Beltline, who also received a $15 million grant for the Flint Trail segment. What is really fascinating about that element is that Clyde and Anna Roach with the ARC are finding ways to break up the contract so that local businesses can take advantage of that opportunity, particularly in places like East Point and Clayton County that hasn't seen a federal grant ever. And I can tell you, at a larger level, we are looking at how do we make sure these investments, these grant dollars, are not just catalyzing in Black and brown communities, but we're also making sure that they're transforming. And the last thing I'll say here is that we are in Atlanta. Atlanta is the poster child of what it means if you get good infrastructure, how it can help create the Black middle class. And that is right here at the airport. And the importance of our DBE, our Disadvantaged Enterprise and Airport Concession Program. We know how it has helped Atlanta. But here's the thing. We just this past week announced that we need to make changes to the DBE program because we've heard all of you, that the current rules actually graduated businesses before they can get to scale. So that's why we made changes. We are now allowing DBEs to have a larger or bigger personal wealth so they can actually stay in the program longer. We're also allowing you to use your certification as a regional, so you're not going to each state to try to get certification. In addition to that, we are forcing more prompt payments because it's one thing to say we want you on these contracts, but we need to make sure you get your money so you can also pay your own employees to invest in your own communities. So these are just some of the examples that we are taking at Department of Transportation to ensure that these dollars truly build back our communities for everyone.
You guys get real excited about talking about all of these great opportunities that are available, and this is exciting information, and it's why we wanted to be able to have this direct conversation led by the Vice President, kicked off here in Atlanta. This is part of a national tour around economic opportunities for all and making sure that that freedom that we're fighting for economic justice, parity, is available to everyone within the federal government as well as in the private sector. So as time comes to an end, I would like to ask for you to talk about, for anyone who is here who wants to know how they can see themselves in the Biden-Harris administration's historic efforts in infrastructure, around small business support, and in financing. How should they connect in order for their ideas to be fulfilled based on the opportunities that each of you have talked about? Janice, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, since I know this is the last time I'll have the mic on this, let me just say thank you to a lot of people in this room, because up here we can build a really good mousetrap. But if we don't have the partners, like the people that are in the room, that are gonna help get the word out, who are gonna make the connections with communities, then our stuff can fall really flat. Which brings me to how people should see themselves in this administration. Please see them through our partners and who we align ourselves with. Again, for us, our booth out there is Carver State Bank and Citizens Trust Bank. Please stop by and see them. Also, come see Treasury and learn about tax credits. I didn't have a chance to talk about that on this panel, but who we are partnering with should tell you everything about the intentionality we're bringing to make sure we get to communities that haven't always felt like the federal government has been on their side, because it hasn't. And we are doing everything we can to change that.
Three ways you can see yourself. Number one, go see Tyra Ruffus, who's the head of our office. She will connect you, literally make you sign and create a profile where you have immediate access to lenders and equity partners who want to invest in your business. That's number one. Number two, if you want a contract, go to sam.gov, register, and there you will see the hundreds and thousands of contracts that are coming through the Department of Transportation as well as our sister agencies. And number three, if you are working with a local government and you say, look, my streets are not paved, I need more transit access, but you know what? I have a great technical assistance program to train young Black men who are formerly incarcerated. Well, guess what? We have programs for that. So all you have to do is go to the Department of Transportation's website, transportation.gov, go to our DOT Navigator, and we will show you how to put together an application to get resources to your communities. And I can tell you, one of the things that we have to do as administration, we have a Justice 40 initiative to make sure 40% of our investments are going to disadvantaged communities. Already in FY22 and FY23, the Department of Transportation has went from 60 to 62% on average of our investments going up that have workforce and entrepreneurial opportunities. So again, those are the three places I would say you should go and see yourselves in it.
It's outstanding. I'd reiterate some of the things that I've highlighted before, but acutely for those folks here in Atlanta, we've got 5 equities here. We've got our enterprising women of color here. We've got our connection to MSIs, minority serving institutions here. We've got 2 CRP award grantees that are working to connect people to capital access opportunities here in Atlanta. And we also have our business center. But beyond that, we have procurement centers that are helping people access procurement opportunities within the federal government and outside of federal government. We have our manufacturing specialty centers for those people who are interested in accessing manufacturing opportunities. And also look inside of yourself for how you are affiliated with different organizations that might be connected to us. We've got a whole line of equities that are connected to this country, but more importantly, we are here to work for you. I say this, and I said it before, and I'll say it again. I have the best job in the federal government. My job is to help communities like ours create wealth. I am here and interested in helping all of you and all of your communities and all the socially and economically disadvantaged communities around this country create something different for themselves. Thank you to the Biden-Harris administration. Thank you to the Congress for passing a law that allows for me to have this amazing job, but more importantly, change the life and trajectory of a whole swath of folks who've been looking for this for a really long time.
Let's give our panel a round of applause. And on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, we are honored to work in collaboration with the Biden-Harris administration and the launch of this Economic Opportunity Tour, which focuses on more than just growth. It's also about advocating for total economic participation, particularly for communities that have been left out, left behind, the Black community and other marginalized communities. We deserve a seat at the table, and as the panel has said, when we lift up Black America, we lift up all of America. When we move more people to the middle class and create more small businesses, it helps increase the GDP for all of America. So that's what this Economic Opportunities Tour is all about. Thank you for joining us today. And let's make sure that you get out and connect to the resources available from the Biden-Harris administration.
Hello, everybody. Y'all are a little quiet today. Y'all, we've got the Vice President of the United States right here in Georgia again. I am Congresswoman Nikema Williams, y'all, and I proudly represent Georgia's fighting 5th Congressional District. Madam Vice President, if you're listening, it is an honor to welcome you back to the 5th District. With all of your visits, we're beginning to think that you might want to call Atlanta home, like so many of our other friends, because y'all, most members of Congress think they represent the best district in Congress, but I really do. Y'all, we are the best in part because we're home to some of the greatest leaders. Our senators, Senator John Ossoff and Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, who I'm proud to count as co-conspirators for social and economic justice. The 5th District is also the best because, y'all, our home is full of promise and opportunity. It was the promise that got me on I-20 in my 91 Honda Accord right after graduating from my HBCU, Talladega College. Y'all, Atlanta was the place that you came to make it happen. Over time, though, I've learned that we still have a lot of work to do. Atlanta has one of the largest racial wealth gaps in the country, and one of my biggest priorities in Congress is closing that racial wealth gap. That's why I'm so thrilled to have our Vice President of the United States back with us today to kick off her nationwide Economic Opportunity Tour. Atlanta has been voted the #1 city to start a business, not once, but twice, y'all. A thriving ecosystem for Black entrepreneurs helped us earn that spot, and y'all, earlier this year, I had the opportunity to bring our future Speaker of the House, Leader Hakeem Jeffries, to Atlanta to show off some of the best that our city has to offer. We toured the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs, and y'all, that place made a real mark on Leader Jeffries' heart. He said after the tour that we need this in other places. So today I had an opportunity to bring the Vice President to that very location. Y'all, we are truly a model for the world, and our work to support Black entrepreneurs is only amplified by the unprecedented investments of the Biden-Harris administration. The fastest creation of Black small businesses in over 30 years doesn't happen without an intentional focus on equity. Equity is at the foundation of true economic opportunity, and y'all, our Vice President and President are leading the way, investing in equity and opportunity across every arena, including our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is sometimes a barrier to opportunity. The damage from interstate highways built as a part of the 1956 Federal Highway Act that divided once thriving Black communities in Atlanta, like Sweet Auburn, Summer Hill, Buttermilk Bottoms, and the West End, just to name a few. The damage lingers to this day. But y'all, the Biden-Harris administration is correcting this injustice with more than $200 million in historic investments right in Atlanta to reconnect our communities and revive centers of Black excellence and opportunity. Has anyone ever heard of the Stitch? Well, if you haven't, you will soon, because this is a transformational piece of opportunity that we're bringing here to Atlanta to bring this project to bridge barriers to jobs, to schools, and to transportation. It'll spur new economic centers where entrepreneurs can start their ventures and provide greater access to customers to reach them. You can live, work, play, and pray right in your neighborhood. I was proud to lead the legislation that made these grants possible because y'all connected communities are thriving communities. I'm grateful for the investments from the Biden-Harris administration that'll put shovels in the ground to bring these projects to life and create good-paying jobs in the process. Y'all, this is only the beginning. There's so much work to be done, but with President Biden and Vice President Harris leading the way, we're gonna deliver on economic opportunity for all so that everyone can share in the promise of America, no matter their zip code and no matter their bank account. So y'all, thank you for joining us and welcoming our Vice President back to Georgia for the 12th time since she's been our Vice President. Thank you.
Please welcome Senator Raphael Warnock.
Well, hello, Atlanta. I'm a Baptist preacher. We believe in call and response. You got to do better than that. Hello, Atlanta, Georgia. Let's give it up for Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's welcome her to Atlanta. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for joining us to commemorate this historic and important investment in our community. And thank you to my brother and partner, Senator Ossoff, and Congresswoman Williams for your cooperation and your leadership on this important project. Let's be very clear, today is a day of celebration. It's a day of celebration because at last we start down the road of repairing and revitalizing and reconnecting neighborhoods in the heart of Atlanta. Neighborhoods that have been historically Black communities torn apart by highway construction. Between 1955 and 1966, that's when they stopped collecting the data. But between 1955 and 1966, some 1.2 million Americans displaced by this highway construction. It went on until 1974, so we don't have all the numbers. But 55% of them African Americans, although we were just 13% of the population. They called it urban renewal. The question is, at whose expense? And so this is about making it right. This is about repairing the damage that was done. This happened in Atlanta. We're centered on this project, the Stitch. Let's hear it for the Stitch. I like that term, by the way, Stitch. That makes me think about grandma's quilt. That's good work. That's good work for the soul. But this happened in communities, Black communities all across our country. The neighborhoods where I grew up, down in Savannah, Georgia, there's an interstate that went right through my neighborhood, and I didn't know the history of that, how it literally separated our communities and destroyed the entrepreneurial ecosystems that were there, separated the land, but also separated the people. And so this means a whole lot for all of us. Right down the street from Ebenezer Baptist Church, where I still serve as senior pastor, just a few blocks away. Many of my parishioners have long connections to this community that has been divided, and many of their stories and their family stories are rooted in the displacement experience all of those years ago. And so for many Georgians, The Stitch is about bringing people back together. It's about expanding opportunities to work and to live with dignity and righting historic wrongs to pass down a better world to our children. My personal hero, Ambassador Mayor Reverend Andrew Young, is in the house. Give Ambassador Young a round of applause. But that was the work of the movement. The movement was about the stitch. It was about repairing the damage. It was about breaking through the barriers of segregation. And ironically, right on the heels of that movement, or while that movement was happening, the land was being separated and the people were being divided. And so that's the work that we continue to do. I'm so grateful to have played a role in making it a reality. This is what delivering for Georgians looks like. And it's just one more example, just one example of the Biden-Harris administration and all of us in Washington centering the people in the decisions that we're making. That's how we got this historic funding for the Stitch through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And that's how we continue to stand up for people and center people time and time again. That's how we capped insulin for seniors at no more than $35 of out-of-pocket costs per month. That's how we invested more than $7 billion, with a B, $7 billion in historically black colleges and universities. That's how we canceled more than $150 billion in student debt for more than 4 million Americans, and how we're pushing to do even more. The Stitch, this historic federal investment, all of these deliverables represent the good that we can accomplish when we put politics aside and center the people. I'm going to keep working with the president and with the vice president and my fellow Georgia lawmakers to keep delivering these strong investments and make sure the work we're doing in Washington works for the people of this state. Thank you once again for being here. Thank you, Madam Vice President, and let's keep pushing. Keep the faith and keep looking up.
Please welcome Senator Jon Ossoff.
Hey guys, how you doing? Y'all give it up again for my colleague, my friend, my brother, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. And she is not quite here yet, but she'll be with us soon. So let's warm up and demonstrate our capacity for appreciation. Put your hands together if you're proud and grateful to have the Vice President of the United States with us here in Georgia today. It is a pleasure to be with you here in College Park. It's a pleasure to be with you here at this beautiful convention center as we celebrate the historic investments in economic opportunity for all that we have made and are making here in the state of Georgia and across the country. And I want to speak for a moment about the transformative impact of the bipartisan infrastructure law. This may not be the policy issue that leads on cable news, which is always focused on what divides us. This may not be the policy issue that gets the most attention on social media, where that which divides and inflames rises to the top. But what is infrastructure? It's the basic connective tissue of our daily lives. For families, for businesses, it's the foundation of economic growth. And this administration and our Congress passed and are now implementing the most significant investment in the infrastructure of the United States since the Eisenhower administration. That work is in progress across Georgia and across the nation right now, and it's important to note that we passed this legislation with bipartisan support. We brought folks together to do what is in the people's interest. As divided and polarized and bitter and even hateful as American politics can seem right now, we united the country to do what is in the national interest. Now, what does that mean day to day in the daily lives of folks here in Georgia and across the country? This is why in Clayton County, stormwater infrastructure is being upgraded to prevent the flooding of homes. This is why in rural communities across Georgia, broadband internet is being expanded in an effort whose ambition can only be matched by the rural electrification efforts of the 1930s. This matters in our daily lives. This is whether or not that third grade girl in South Georgia has to be driven down to the McDonald's to get on Wi-Fi to do her homework, or can do it at home. This is whether or not underserved communities across our state can compete, can get online, can access world markets and resources. Broadband internet matters. Let me give you a sense of the scale of investment that's ongoing across our state right now. Fiscal year 2024, this year alone, the bipartisan infrastructure law is investing more than $1.8 billion in surface transportation upgrades across the state of Georgia. We're repairing roads and bridges. We're upgrading airports and seaports and rail systems across the state. And this is a long-term down payment on our economic competitiveness, on public health, and on our quality of life. So as this election season heats up and you hear so much divisive rhetoric, and there are so many efforts to tear Americans apart, let's stay focused on what matters: our health, our safety, our opportunity for every community here in Georgia. I also want to highlight for you the historic and extraordinary investments that we have delivered in historically black colleges and universities here in Georgia and nationwide. And you heard this from Senator Warnock. But for Georgia's HBCUs alone, more than $250 million in supplemental investment just in the last 3 years. And so as we work with this administration to expand economic opportunity for all, that means expanding opportunity and access for all. And Georgia's HBCUs, which are gems in our nation's educational system, are crucial partners in this effort, and they will continue to have the full support of the administration and of the Congress. I see Ambassador Young is here with us. Ambassador, thank you for your decades of service. I'll just close by noting this, because Ambassador Young, you embody so much of what makes Georgia special. You embody the spirit of a generation who, having fought successfully for voting rights and civil rights and human rights, led the way to make this community the leader in the world in opportunities for black entrepreneurs. That was your work, Ambassador. And I know that the Vice President is here, and we are united in this effort to continue ensuring that every community in the state of Georgia has access to capital, has access to education, has access to markets, so that we can live up to the legacy and the example that you set. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you all for being here to welcome the Vice President of the United States to the state of Georgia. It's a privilege and an honor to represent you in the United States Senate. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Atlanta, how we doing today? I like it. Can y'all tell I'm excited? Good afternoon on this beautiful Monday where we have so much to be thankful for, especially in the presence of the first woman and Black American to be elected as Vice President of our country. Now, aside from my wife and maybe my mom, I'm not sure how she feels. I know y'all didn't come here to hear me speak, so I'll try to make this as brief as possible. My name is Donald Boone, graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, an Atlanta resident, husband, and father of 3. And I also happen to be the CEO and founder of a venture-backed software startup, Boxed Up. We help small and medium-sized businesses start and grow their online equipment rental company. So obviously, everything that we're talking about today is extremely near and dear to my heart. But, like many entrepreneurs and those in this crowd, the path to me getting here today has not been easy. It's had its fair share of ups and downs, scrapes and bruises, paths less traveled. And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody, but to get Boxed Up off the ground back in 2019, I cashed out my 401k, y'all. Not part of it, all of my 401k. And then soon thereafter, I also became American Express's, MasterCard, and Visa's ideal client and best friend. And you guys probably know what's coming next. I maxed out all 3 of my credit cards to keep my business growing. And if that wasn't enough to make my wife want to divorce me, in 2001, we're talking peak COVID, we moved with our 3 kids from Seattle to Greenville, South Carolina, across the country to move in with my mother-in-law. All so that I could chase this dream of building Black wealth. But here's the thing. Thank you. Thankfully, it doesn't have to be this difficult. In addition, like today, Vice President Harris and the administration are doing everything in their power to change that. She gets us and she gets what we need to be successful, and she's been fighting for years to make that happen and expand access to capital for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And last year, I had the privilege of being invited with business owners like myself to the White House to actually share our feedback and learn how they can better support us all. And in 2003, they also backed thousands of loans worth billions with a B of dollars to small businesses. Do y'all understand what I could have done with just a little bit of some of that money? So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our moderators for today. A lot of you guys in the audience know them well. They are the co-founders of the revolutionary financial empowerment platform, Earn Your Leisure. Earn Your Leisure's empire spans the world's largest financial festival, InvestFest, held right here in Atlanta, and the Earn Your Leisure Network, which includes 3 top 100 podcasts and a robust online presence with over 3 million followers across all social media channels. Please welcome to the stage Rashad Bilal and Troy Millings.
Are we speaking or?
Not yet. And finally, to tell us a little bit more and how we can get our hands on some of those dollars and support small businesses, it's my honor to introduce my sorority sister and the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Atlanta. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Okay, we're in Atlanta. All right, but before we get started, I want to welcome you to the Economic Opportunity Tour. This is stop number 1, and what better place to do it here in Atlanta, Georgia?
That's right.
The city of opportunity. We want to acknowledge a few people before we get started. Senator John Ossoff. Senator Raphael Warnock. Representative Steve Horsford, who is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and is celebrating a birthday with us today.
Yes, he is.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
And Vincent Evans, who works with him.
Representative Nikema Williams. And the leaders of the Black Economic Alliance who have helped partner to make sure that this tour runs smoothly. So congratulations, and thank you guys for being here today.
Yes. You know, we do events all the time, but this is a little bit more different, I would say that, you know, a different dress code. They're not as enthusiastic for our presence.
They're warming up,
It's more presidential, for sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you for inviting us to have this conversation. It is something that we are definitely looking forward to, for sure.
Me too, thank you.
So my first question is, how are you and the president building an economy that provides an opportunity for all?
So let me start by thanking Donald Boone for that introduction and being here. He is one of the almost 50 entrepreneurs that I invited to my office at the White House last summer to talk about their work, and so I could listen to them and learn what we needed to do to get the word out about what we are doing. And this Economic Opportunity Tour, as much as anything, was born out of that, and then a dinner that the three of us had at my house, and is therefore about being on the road to let folks know what is available to them in the spirit of understanding we have so many entrepreneurs. We have so many people who have incredible ideas. They are innovative, hardworking, ambitious, have aspirations, have vision. None of that we lack for in the community. But for most folks, we lack access to the resources that will feed those ambitions and those aspirations. I chose Atlanta to be the kickoff for this Economic Opportunity Tour for many reasons that include one of the leaders who is among us, and I would ask us to rise and applaud him, and that is Ambassador Andy Young. Who is here with his wife, Caroline. And I will tell you, as a point of personal privilege, Ambassador Young has been an advisor to me, a mentor to me, and a friend, and has always talked about his vision, his shared vision with Dr. King, about the vision for America that included a vision that was about fighting for civil rights and understanding that to achieve true equality, we have to also have an economic agenda. And that agenda must include speaking to people's ambitions. That yes, everybody wants a job, and President Joe Biden and I are very proud that in our administration we have brought Black unemployment down to historic lows. But that's a baseline. We also are focused on something Ambassador Young has talked so much about, which is creating opportunity for people to build wealth and to thereby not only strengthen their family, Donald Boone talked about that, but strengthen the economy of the community as a whole, and everybody in society benefits. So that's why I'm here, and to talk about what we have done, whether it be an extension of the work I did in the United States Senate to get $12 billion more into community banks, or the work that we have done, and you heard the panel earlier today, that is about uplifting our capacity through the Treasury Department. I want to thank Secretary Yellen in her absence for what she has done to be a partner to me around focusing on a number of issues that are about access to capital, but with a focus also on minority-owned businesses. And then what we did to create the Economic Opportunity Coalition, which is, Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank, Google, and getting private equity to invest in community banks, some of the local community banks being represented here, to increase access to capital so that our entrepreneurs in the community have a place to go where it's the people who are doing the lending know the community, know the capacity of the community, know the mores of the community, and can provide not only capital, but the knowledge that so many need to understand how to run a business. You have a great idea, but you don't necessarily know how to run a payroll. Don't necessarily know what kind of system there is for business taxes in a way that allows you to maximize, right, your resources. Don't necessarily know how you're going to keep up your inventory, and don't necessarily know what is available in terms of creating access to markets. So you have a good product, but you need access to markets. So the work that we have been doing over the last 3 years has been focused on all of these areas, and also understanding the context in which we exist, which is the longstanding disparities, and understanding that in spite of those who in certain parts of our country want to attack DEI, we understand that you can't truly invest in the strength of our nation if you don't pay attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are, for example, paying attention to the fact that in order for any family or individual to have economic well-being, much less the opportunity to create wealth, we need to take into account the history of, for example, the ability of black folks in America to own a home. Let's go far back enough, we can go even further, but let's go far back enough to remember the GI Bill. That was a promise by our nation to invest in who we called the greatest generation, who fought in that war. And so there was a policy that said, let us reward them for fighting for our nation and all that we hold sacred, and give them access to loans for home ownership. And the reality, however, of a well-intentioned plan is that it was not well-intentioned in the way it was implemented for a lot of people, in that black veterans did not receive in equal measure those loans. And so whereas a whole population of people had public policy that was about federal investment on lifting people up, certain folks, and black folks in particular, veterans, did not receive the benefit. So now look at the disparity that's created even by that. We look at the history of redlining. We look at the history of segregation. We remember what happened, I know we're going to talk about these urban plans and what that did to cut freeways across communities and limit their access to commerce. We look at what we've been dealing with as an administration around bias in home appraisals, even to this day, where it is well documented that when a black family in certain places is trying to get an appraisal for their home, be it to get a second loan or to sell it, they're appraised at a lower value than a similar situated white family. And so these are some of the areas that we are focused on through our economic policies. We've been dealing with student loan debt, understanding that black students are much more likely to take out a Pell Grant. We've seen an increase in tuition over the years, but the increase in Pell Grants has not been commensurate with that. We're working on that a bit. But student loan debt and the forgiveness of that as a way to allow people to have more assets that they can then put into buying a home or building a business. So these are some of the examples of what we've been doing. We've been focused on medical debt. Let me just add that. Medical debt can be one of the fastest ways that somebody can go bankrupt. And often that medical debt is accrued because of some medical emergency that someone or someone in their family has experienced that they didn't have the savings or the anticipation for. And we have now put in place a rule that is in the process of being implemented where we have required that medical debt cannot be a part of your credit score. And medical debt cannot be considered when your credit is being evaluated for a car loan, a home loan, things of that nature. So these are some examples of what we've been doing.
Yeah, I want to stay with that theme of access because it's a real issue. When we talk about access, especially communities of color, we've lacked it. A lot of it has been done for many reasons, but specifically, and you kind of alluded to it, urban renewal.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing what work is being done to address some of these historic inequities.
So during the late 50s and 60s, there was this whole policy push, national policy push that was called urban renewal. But what it ended up doing was, and it was supposed to be about making life easier for people that live in the areas where it happened. But essentially it was about a policy that was directed in making it, many people will say, easier for folks who had wealth and means to move to the suburbs and still have access to downtown. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's essentially it. And you see across the country, I'm going to be in Detroit on this tour, I'm going to be in Milwaukee. As you all know, I'm from California, from the Bay Area, we saw it there, where these freeways were built, and basically to cut through communities, which bifurcated the community so that folks couldn't have easy access to, let's say, the small businesses from where they lived. And it ended up decimating these communities for years. So what we have been doing through our infrastructure bill is putting resources into basically reconnecting communities. So here in Atlanta, for example, Freeway 75 and 85, what we are doing is dealing with the fact that I guess there was a division from Sweet Auburn from downtown, and what we need to do to reconnect by creating basically pathways that include over that pathway creating parks, but literally the infrastructure and recreating that infrastructure so we can reconnect communities. So here in Atlanta, there's going to be $158 million out of our infrastructure bill that will do that work, and it's going to create, we estimate, about 13,000 jobs. And also focus on affordable housing, which was one of the big issues that we're facing as a country.
Another major issue for entrepreneurs is access to capital. We know that I think less than 1% goes to black businesses. So what are some steps that you guys are doing to kind of correct that issue, which suffocates a lot of businesses from getting started or from expanding?
So here's where I come to this point. None of us have achieved success without support. None of us. And without someone or people who understood our talent and our dreams and encouraged us to achieve it and showed us how to achieve it. And as much as anything, the spirit behind the push for access to capital, and in particular on this tour focusing on minority small businesses and black-owned small businesses and entrepreneurs who are black men, is to recognize the disparities that have existed around the access to the opportunity to achieve success. Again, I will say, because success is almost always a function of some investment from a community or others that went into the individual who then achieves success. So the access to capital push that we have made has been about, yes, getting more federal dollars into community banks. It has been about getting the private sector and the big banks to invest, because they will admit, and we know, they are not necessarily in the place where we need them to be situated to know the community. Access to capital encompasses a commitment to also making sure that we are doing the teaching to then create the access to markets. So it's about financial literacy, a lot of what we talked about before around helping people know how to start a business and keep a business going. And it's also about understanding that our small, I interchange the word entrepreneur and small business. I think basically, depending on the generation, someone considers themselves an entrepreneur in terms of younger small businesses, but it's all entrepreneurship, right? What we also know is that our entrepreneurs, our small business owners, are not only leaders in business, but community leaders, civic leaders, hiring locally, mentoring, creating opportunities for economic development and growth within individuals and communities. So the work we are doing to extend access to capital is about tapping into the ambition that exists, the aspirations that exist, and then giving people the resources that are necessary, money and other resources to actually achieve success. Can you talk a little bit about how you all achieved your success and how this kind of approach would lend itself to others having a story similar to yours?
Yeah, we started with an iPhone and an idea. That's what we always say. Like we didn't have any capital when we started, right? And that's the beauty of social media. Technology has really empowered everybody and kind of leveled the playing field. But what we're seeing is that when we're interviewing, other entrepreneurs that may not have the same business model as us, they're having an extremely difficult time. And especially when we look at the next generation of unicorn companies, billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies, those are mostly tech companies, and you do need a lot more money to start a tech company. Right. So I feel like the entrepreneur in Morehouse and Spelman, they have just as good ideas as Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, but they don't have the capital.
Right.
So they either abort those ideas or they work for those companies, but even that's an issue because we know that we are not hired at the same rate in Silicon Valley as other people as well, right? So even talking to Robert Smith and a lot of other people like that, this is a very complex problem. But I think from our perspective, we have a unique perspective because we actually get to talk to entrepreneurs every single day. And we can understand how $100,000 could just accelerate their business, right? $50,000 can accelerate their business, right? And even looking in the crowd, we have entrepreneurs. I see Pinky Cole, I see Eastside Golf, and these are young entrepreneurs that went out on the limb and bet on their self, right? But a little bit more capital, they can be the next McDonald's. They could be the next Nike, right? And that's what we need in our community so they can employ.
That's right.
So they can employ not just 100 people, but 100,000 people.
That's right, and that you hit it on the head in terms of how we feel about this. This is, yes, there are going to be those who need $20,000 loans, but folks need $1 million loans, right? And when we talk about a small business, it could be a dozen employees, but it could also be 200 employees. And it is that piece of it that is about getting to that next plateau. That is very much how I'm thinking about this tour and the work that we are doing. So yes, it's about startup capital, but also what is required then to grow and to scale and have it be sustainable. One of the pieces I failed to mention before, but I'll mention now, is the president and I, when we first came in, made a commitment that we are going to increase by 50% the number of federal contracts going to minority-owned businesses. And we're on track to get that done. So part of the point of this tour has been to give folks information about how you apply for a federal contract. The reason that we made that commitment is because we then put in place more information that is available to more people about how to get a federal contract, because a lot of that historically has been who you know. And when you get a federal contract, it is potentially yours for life. And is very sustainable and can be the source of great growth for that individual who owns that business and beyond. I'll also say this, and I was saying it to a few folks earlier. The work that we have accomplished as an administration, be it the infrastructure bill and what we are doing to invest, it'll be trillions of dollars in infrastructure, roads, bridges, sidewalks, all of that, transportation, public transportation. What we have done with the CHIPS and Science Act, which is about investment in technology and research and development. What we are doing with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is about at least $1 trillion invested in the climate, but a clean energy economy. One of the compelling reasons for me to start this tour now and to ask all the leaders here for help in getting the word out about what is available to entrepreneurs and small businesses is because we are in the process of putting a lot of money in the streets of America for this growth. And we want to make sure everyone has access to the opportunity to take advantage of the contracts and the work that is being generated by this policy push. And so we want to make sure people know about it and then know where they can receive the support to be ready to take on the work and then to grow their capacity. I was very surprised to learn that over 70% of construction companies in America, and I'm pretty sure that number is still correct, 70% of construction companies in America employ 20 or fewer people. Those are small businesses, right? Who, when we're building back up America's infrastructure, a lot of that is construction work. Got to make sure people know about what's available to them to actually take those jobs.
Yeah, I think that's why this moment is so important, right? I always believe that first it's the awareness part.
Yeah.
We understand what needs to be done. Then it's the education around it, which I think people kind of leave out. But it's the action piece. And it feels like there's some action, especially with this tour. There's the action that's going to take place. I want to talk about something that's important for every entrepreneur, and that's the cost of living, affordability. And so we've seen interest rates, obviously, over the past 4 years, they've risen. What steps are being taken to lower the burden of housing costs? Because like you said, there's disparities in it. We can go all the way back to the GI Bill when we talk about the creation of generational wealth throughout communities. It's kind of missed us. So what is being done now from your side?
So to your point, we know that home ownership is probably the most effective way to build intergenerational wealth. And it's a fact. And just think about it in this context. As a homeowner, then as a parent, if you have a child that wants to go to, okay, that's what I'm gonna say, Howard University.
Such a great choice. Wonder where you got that one from.
I couldn't help myself. Or FAMU, or Spelman, or Morehouse, or Clark. and Clark, Atlanta, yes. And as a parent then, as a homeowner, if you have some equity in your home, you can say to your child, you know, don't take out the loan. I'll take out some of the equity to help you pay for tuition so that you don't graduate with extraordinary student loan debt. And so that when you graduate, you can do your dream job and not worry about those hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and you can go on and prosper. As a homeowner, if your child says to you, I want to start a business, I've got a great idea, and you as a parent can say, let me take out some equity to give you some startup capital. Intergenerational wealth. However, again, as we've already discussed, there have been biases and explicit laws and practices that have been in place over generations to exclude certain folks and communities from that opportunity to create that wealth. And so we're focused on it, also knowing that the net worth of a homeowner is about 40 times that of a renter. Think about that. And so what we can do to uplift and create opportunities for that are very important. So one of the things we've done is we have proposed that there would be for first generation homeowners, so first time homeowners, at a certain income level, a $25,000 credit to be able to put a down payment down, which we know would make a huge difference. And then we're looking at an additional policy that would be about basically, for those who qualify, $400 a month in tax credits so people can be able to pay their mortgage on a monthly basis. And we are on track to a commitment to build 2 million more affordable housing units, including what we're doing here in terms of the freeway. So that's important. But the reality of it is that when we focus on this issue, we got to realize that part of the reason everything is so expensive is we don't have enough supply on the market. And this is a national problem. So our investments are about also what we need to do to build affordable housing. I'm looking at some issues around how we can look at vacant commercial real estate and conversion. There's a lot of this issue that is about also what we need to do to focus on local rules that might make it zoning rules that might make it different for these things to happen, and how we can create incentives that are productive for everybody. And then it gets back to, for example, the student loan debt. And what we have seen, we have now forgiven over $150 billion in student loan debt. On average, we're looking at somewhere around $70,000 per person. And especially if we're talking about people in public service, nurses, firefighters, teachers, and doubling the number for them. But one of the other things I'd ask the leaders here in terms of helping me get the word out, let people know they qualify for student loan debt even if they never graduated. That's really important for folks to know. Because, think about it in terms of the logic of the policy. Why is it that the case? Because sadly, they didn't graduate, some people because they couldn't afford to keep paying tuition. But they still have to pay back that loan. So help us get the word out so that people apply. And I guess that gets to the heart of this tour and everything else we're doing. Folks in a lot of situations just don't know what's available to them. And I need the help of the leaders who are here to get the word out so people know what is available to them.
Well, that leads me to my next question. I'm not sure if you already answered it or not, but I was going to ask about student loan and what the administration has done for, obviously, there's millions of Americans that, once again, are suffocated with student loan debt, and it's really crippled their lives.
So, I'll tell you, we went bolder with our plan and for student loan debt relief, and then the court cut some of the stuff that we were doing, but we have not stopped. And so we are, through whatever, and all of the powers that we have through executive orders and things of that nature, been forgiving, again, up to $150 billion of student loan debt. What I have seen in my travels around what this means for the people who have applied and figured it out, it's extraordinary. I mean, I've met people who have been forgiven, 3-digit thousands of dollars of debt. I've met teachers who've been teaching for 20-something years, carrying that debt and not giving up the profession of teaching. We don't pay them enough as it is. And, and so thinking about that, and let's think about, there were those who resisted the policy from the beginning and said, well, why do they should pay off their loans. Why do they need it forgiven? Well, let's go back to the example of public servants, nurses, firefighters, teachers. We don't pay them enough, and people who have a calling to, for example, teach other people's children, who pay for school supplies out of their own back pocket, and the benefit they give to all of us as a society, should we not think about that and think about the fact that we want them to stay in that noble profession? I think about the number of young people who have a calling to do that kind of work, similar kind of work, who have to go to some other kind of job because they need to pay off their loans, when we want that people would be able to follow their passion, especially when it benefits all of us and uplifts society. So the reasons behind the policy include just that. And again, let's just let people know that they don't have to have graduated in order to get their debt forgiven, especially if that might mean that if they want to go back to school, they can go back and know that they can afford to go back.
Well, this is coming from a teacher, I say educator now, turned entrepreneur. I couldn't agree with you more. Pay our teachers. First, I just want to thank you for this. This has been an amazing opportunity. But we do have entrepreneurs here in the building. Where are our entrepreneurs at? There they go.
Big Dave cheesesteaks.
That's a
I see
fact.
Isaac Hayes in the back.
Shout out to Isaac Hayes.
He can't sing as good as his dad, though.
No. We wouldn't want him to either. What piece of advice would you like to leave this audience? Like I said, Atlanta is such a hub of innovation for many businesses, but what would you like to leave this audience with in terms of advice for entrepreneurship?
That you are worthy of and entitled to receive an investment in your dream and your ambition, and to seek out the resources that exist, and we're trying to make it easier for you to find those resources, but seek them out and know, it's interesting, there's some studies that show that Black entrepreneurs are often less likely than others to actually apply for a loan for fear they will be rejected. I mean, it's pretty significant data that supports that point. So part of my advice is go for it, apply for it, and get the word out. Right? We don't lack for really incredible vision and entrepreneurial creative thought. And so it's just a matter of let's not let society or history impede or silence those ambitions. And then I would urge everyone to know, for example, community lenders and to seek them out. I was just earlier at Rice, and what's happening there in terms of helping young entrepreneurs get ready and then have access. I met this young brother, he's got a water company and is now gonna be selling at Walmart, right? And so there are institutions and places that are available to you, groups that are available, mentors here. I would say to the entrepreneurs who are here, make sure you talk to the person sitting next to you, because they may just be that person who is willing to mentor you or willing to give you some advice about how they achieve their success. But don't give up, because we need you. Our country needs you. And that's how we're going to be strong. And I want to just put a fine point on it. Be proud of your ambition. Be proud of your ambition. Have ambition. Dream with ambition. Do not ever be burdened by other people's limited ability to see what is possible. Don't let that burden you. My mother always used to say to me, don't you ever let anybody tell you who you are. You tell them who you are, right? I have another saying. I eat no for breakfast. I don't hear no until maybe the 10th time. Don't hear no. Don't hear no.
Madam Vice President, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.